So when we deal with APIs, like application programming interfaces, we could see that they could come in many forms. So for example, in the internet, we could find that we have web APIs. So it's, let's say, kind of APIs that could be accessible via HTTP protocol. So this API actually defines endpoints, valid requests, response formats, and all that information which is required for us to make sure that our requests looking good and all necessary operations will be provided. And in terms of web API, what else we have? We have, let's say, some different categories of those APIs. Like for example, we have open APIs. They are also known as external or public APIs, and we know that there are, let's say, minimum restrictions around them, right? And some companies in general providing open APIs, and they could be accessible, let's say, from anywhere, and we have very minimal restrictions to use them. And external developers could use it from different countries, from different companies, and so on and so forth, could just continue to use these APIs. Like for example, maybe some currency exchange APIs, maybe some weather APIs, and so on and so forth. So no restrictions, so that's why it's open APIs. So also one of divisions, it's internal APIs, and what is the difference between open API and internal API? Internal APIs are actually hidden from external users, and only some companies using their resources. So they are, let's say, some companies personal APIs or some teams personal APIs that their product use, their teams use, and their employers use. Another possible type of API, it's a partner API. So in general, it's technically similar to OpenAPI, but here another way of us to access those APIs. So for example, it could be a partnership between, for example, some companies, and as a part of this partnership, we could have a possibility to authorize into some specific API and make necessary operations through this IP. So it's based on the partnership. And also one of the APIs that could be available, but it's a little bit, let's say, different. It's more about architecture. So composite APIs. So composite APIs allow us to access several endpoints in one call. So for example, they could be a part of one API, or sometimes we could see situations that they are actually part of different APIs or different endpoints. But anyway, what could be done is we could, as a part of the single API call, make multiple operations and invoke multiple services or data sources, and work with the composite API when it's necessary. And usually it's very useful to use it when you use microservices architecture. So let's deep dive into composite APIs and let's check what it is. So what is it? It's first of all design approach that allowing us to batch our API requests based on their sequence into single API call. So rather than we have multiple trips, right, to the server, like make one callout to create a customer, another callout to create an order for the customer, also another one to add item and another item, change order status, and so on and so forth. And you could see that there are a good bunch of operations, right? Because each API call, we need to prepare it, we need to send it, we need to spend our platform limits based on the platforms that we use. And also, what else? We need to parse responses, make sure that everything is okay, and continue to work with that. So in general, how it looks like is how a subset of API requests. For example, when we have, let's say, internet shopping, and we have here shopping cart, and we're trying to use it, and we would like to, like at the same time create order, create a customer, add item into the cart, change order status, and to perform all this big amount of operations, we need to perform a good portion of API calls. So composite APIs allow us to reduce the number of API calls and reduce this big headache that we might have. So for example, we here could see how composite API requests look like. So here are what we have. First of all, here we have object composite request, And what we include into the body, it's we include method that we are using for our operations. We include in paths of our APIs that we would like to use. Here and here also we use references. Like for example, here if we are creating a new customer, then based on these references, we could use this customer reference at ID in other operations that we will have in the same transaction. So by this way, you could see that we have, let's say, a chain of operations with specified order, and based on this specified order, based on the provided method, path, reference, and body, we could let our APIs know how, let's say, they should proceed with our data, and to reduce, additional API calls, we have this reference field. So in general, it's very cool for us to use, and at the end, it's good for us to get something like that. So for example, when we have general result for entire operation of the composite API call, is it true or false or whatever, and composite response. Like for example, here we could see that we have response provided for each operations of the API invocations that were used here in the chain. Like for example, for the new customer, ID was the following, here was the success, status is the following. For the new order, here also was a success and it was a true. And we could see in general that entire operation have status true. So now we understand how it's work. Now we understand what it's include, what is included into the response, and how we should work with that. But how to design a composite API, right? What we need to consider when we are working with that. Okay, so when we have our composite API, most likely it will be single endpoint to which our customers, or for example in other teams, will try to send some API calls. But please consider that it's not in general should be just single endpoint. It could be a different endpoint that you will use inside of architecture of your API. And what we need to make sure is that we, let's say, consider when we're creating for composite API. So first of all, it's request representation. At minimum, we need an array of objects that includes endpoint, method, and a way to pass data parameters with each request. So it's the same what we were able to see here, right? Object, method, pass, reference, body, and that kind of architecture. So after that, we need to think about authentication. So will credentials be passed from the composite call to individual request, or do they need to be much more granularly provided, and they should be included into underlying layers? So let's example a situation. We have composite request. For example, 3 methods could be done for free without any kind of authentication, and there are, let's say, third one or fourth where we need to have authentication. So we need to decide, like, should we have authentication for entire composite request, or should it be done just for some portion of that request? Response rendering. Also, when we perform in response rendering, right, we need to understand what kind of subset of representative data we should include from the previous step. Like for example, here you could see maybe good example, because for each operations that we actually include into our composite request, we have included here everything which is related to the our composite request response. Also here we have another item, it's field references. So possibility for us to use data from the earliest steps, and it will help us a lot, because in that case we will not need to pass data from one request to another. As you could see here, we have reference field new customer, and here new customer.id. So with this dynamic invocation. About error handling. So why error handling is so important? Because sometimes we could have partial success, right? Because just some of operation could be failed, and we need to understand which one of them as the result should give us entire rollback of our operation, and which of them, let's say, allowing us to moving forward. Let's say 3 operation of 5 are completed, then in general everything's okay, or how we should deal with it. And it's also mentioned here in all or none, or error handling, like how we should represent all of kind of errors that's happening, how we could debug our API responses, and how to deal with all of that kind of stuff. So the decision we make based on this consideration will impact the design of our composite API. So it's something that is totally understandable. And finally, what is the difference between batch APIs and composite API? So depending on our need, what we could get, it's in some use cases when we need to perform similar operations with necessary number of use cases, like for example we would like to create 10 different users, right, or 10 different operations, or make 10 different customers. So what we could do is we could invoke batch API, because in general what we could do, or what we would like to get, it's a result of 10 totally the same and equals operations, and we would like to get them in the result and get them in a single call. So it could be done, but here is the difference between let's say batch API and the composite API. So batch API, group API can call are not necessarily related. For example, rather than making 10 API calls to create 10 customers, and batch API endpoint would achieve the same result, okay, in single call, but some key difference in batch API make easier to implement. Okay, a subset of calls can fail without impacting the others. Subsequent calls do not need to reference previous data. If a call fails, there are no need to roll back changes made by other steps. So Composite API provides a larger number of use cases, so they will likely be more powerful for consumers. However, batch APIs are not an excellent option in a sequence, and reference features are not needed to meet our common use cases. So it's something that we get as a result of this operation. So what I would like to mention that in general I used batch APIs only to create bunch of the same type of data, and composite API only when we need to perform something like that. So if some of you realized that kind of API in Salesforce, I think that it could be interesting experience, and you could share it in the comment for the current video. So I will also attach that link to this document into the description of the video. And another interesting thing for you that I would like to share, it's maybe you never thought about it, it's how we could expose our APIs, right? When we just prepare some API, what we could do that in general, if it's so let's say something brand new, or we just let's say resolve some big problem, or we prepared composite API for very big transactions and operations that previously was not used, and there was no way, like to reduce the time to complete this kind of operation. We could introduce in the market our APIs as a product, or for example we use them as a services or wherever, so we could actually expose our APIs as a product. So if some of you are interested in, you could research for this information, like how to expose API as a product and how to make money from that item. So that's it from my side, and thank you for your time.